But I always think that there's a real danger of we as fundraisers and we as a sector taking an increasingly kind of transactional approach to supporter engagement. Mark, there is so much in that question.
It's the absolute tough one that everyone talks about.
Do I devote resources, headspace, and other capability and capacity to saying to people, no, we don't just do emergencies, we do all that other amazing stuff? Or do, as I say, do we double down on what we're famous for, knowing full well that people get it, and so straight away you've got half the job done. But one of the things that we're wrestling with as a directorate and as an organisation is our approach towards innovation, basically. We are alive to the fact that actually, our paradigm, our current model is stable, but doesn't necessarily give us a trajectory for growth that we know that we need, that we require. Legacy marketing expenditure, as an example, always the easiest thing to cut. Always, but no, there is a recognition that that feels very, very short term. We are really, really conscious of is that high value giving, I feel, is an underexploited part of the market. I think, if my memory serves me rightly, that the Sunday Times giving list was highlighting that in 2023, I believe it was, there was a £1 billion uplift in donated income from the 100 top philanthropists.
Very basically, is that for any fundraiser, it is common sense to start by thinking about the donor, not the product.
But the thing is, no. But I agree with you entirely. But to quote my my much loved and dearly departed mum, the only thing about common sense is it's not that common.
Hello, and we're back again, and I am with my co-conspirator on Two Peas on a Pod, Mr. Giles Pegram, CBE. Hello, Giles. And today we have got one of the, I suppose, the most illustrious fundraisers in the sector to interview. We're in the hallowed halls of the Red Cross in London, and we are with Mr. Paul Amadi. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Mark. Great to be here. Hello, Giles.
Hi, Paul.
Long time.
Yeah, it has been a long time. But we've known each other a long time. I want to start. I met you about 15 years ago for the first time, and I remember the time vividly. We spent a good hour together, and I was completely taken aback because for the whole of that hour, you talked about people. You talked about donors, supporters, what motivated them, what didn't motivate them, etc. You didn't talk at all about techniques, processes, products, etc. And that is so unusual. And so what I really want to ask you, and I did give you warning of this, is where does that approach come from? Where in your soul does that approach to fundraising come from?
So I remember that first hour that we spent together vividly as well, Giles. And you're entirely right. You did give me fair warning that this was something that you wanted to explore. And since then I've been thinking about, I wish I could say something really, really profound. But the reality is, I can't think of anything profound by way of response other than to say that for me it's genuinely the kind of application of common sense. If you speak to my colleagues, people I've been around, it's incredibly, I'm not quite sure how to say more to be described as illustrious at all. But thank you for it. I mean, we'll ask your listeners about an hour or so later. But I've never really described myself genuinely, and I don't think I honestly could describe myself as a fundraising specialist or somebody who's been kind of fixated by technique. For me, fundraising has ultimately always been about understanding people, what connects them to the cause, what motivates them, why are they particularly interested in a particular issue. And the reason why I've always been interested in that is when you have that understanding about people's motivation, you can get an understanding about, okay, this is what it's going to take to secure a gift, this is what it's going to take to secure longevity, loyalty, this is how I can ensure that when I'm engaging with you, I can provide you as a donor, as a supporter, with the best possible experience. And I know instinctively if I do that, you'll give more generously, and you'll give for longer. And those are things that you know, if I look at the world through that way, and I have done, as you pointed out, for 15 years, technique then becomes secondary. You know, it's not the thing that I kind of fixate on. It's a means to an end, basically. But if I understand what's in your soul, why you're particularly kind of connected to a cause, then I know that I can make that connection, and I know that I can provide you with the richest and the most fulfilling experience. And the other kind of build I would have on that, and you know, Giles, you and I have kind of, I think, you know, reflected and ruminated on this. I kind of always have felt that fundraisers we're conduits, really. We're the people that join the person with the cause, basically. But the more that I can understand, as I say, why that's important to you as a donor, the more effective that I can be.
I love the way you use richest.
Yes.
People don't often talk about the rich relationship between the donor and the cause.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a rich relationship, fulfilling. But I think what you're saying, very basically, is that for any fundraiser, it is common sense to start by thinking about the donor, not the product.
But the thing is, but I mean, I agree with you entirely. But you know, to quote my, you know, my much loved and, you know, dearly departed mum, the only thing about common sense is it's not that common. You know, and so absolutely. But I think that we tend to be kind of really fixated on, you know, on which technique and you know, how we're going to apply it and what have you. And of course, you need to have that rigor. You need to have that kind of intelligence and forethought. But you must ultimately, I think, never lose sight of the fact that ultimately a donor wants to be connected to the cause. And it's our job to find the most effective and most impactful ways of doing this. And you know, I'll return to that word, rich. You know, the conversations that I've had with donors, sometimes it just absolutely kind of reduces you to tears when you give them the opportunity and the space to talk about how fulfilling they find supporting this particular organisation. You know, Giles, our most meaningful and consistent interactions came when we were at NSPCC, you know, I can remember you and another colleague kind of saying to me, in fact it wasn't a colleague, it was one of the senior volunteers, saying, particularly with NSPCC, you must always reflect on why is that person involved in this particular organisation. There's almost certainly going to be a story there, and I've held on to that as well, basically, as a really kind of, you know, powerful motivator for me.
Thank you, Paul.
That's okay.
I think if we finish the discussion there after 10 minutes, you audience would have gained so much.
You're so kind.
All the next written bonus. Mark, over to you for the bonus.
Thank you.
Well, actually, though, Mark, before I mean, do you, as somebody who kind of has spanned the sector, who, I mean, I can remember in our first interaction accurately me describing you, and still the case, as a fundraising guru, do you not think that we sometimes lose sight of you know, that focus on the why and the focus on what is it that, you know, that's motivating somebody to give?
You think that we do?
No, I'm asking you whether the fundraising sector in general.
Well, I have a view on that, which I've already expressed in several podcasts, but I'm going to ask you about it later.
Okay,
what your view is,
right.
Because it's a loaded question.
Okay.
How do fundraisers see fundraising?
Yeah.
How did they see it 10, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
How do they see it now? I think getting better, I think getting worse. Maybe, should we do that now? Should we explore that now? I mean, this is the big picture stuff. But, let's explore it.
I'm quite happy, so carry on.
Is fundraising getting better? Is it worse? Are we becoming more focused on donors, less focused on donors? What's going on in the fundraising?
I think the challenge of these types of questions is, or maybe it's these kind of, you know, moments and set pieces that they call for kind of quite sweeping statements, as it were, whereas I would imagine, or I believe, that the picture's a little bit more nuanced. But I always think that you know, there's a real danger of we as fundraisers and we as a sector taking an increasingly kind of transactional you know, approach to supporter engagement. I think, you know, even things like you know, you and I can still, sure, it's not that long ago that, you know, the Olive Cook kind of situation and crisis arose. It was the you know, very pinnacle, I think, of us taking that incredibly kind of transactional approach to supporters, regarding them almost as, you know, as commodities and as ATMs, rather than as living, breathing people that, you know, that we need to be thoughtful, sensitive, mindful of. And so I just think that it's always something that we've got to kind of fight against as a sector. That we've always got to think about our supporters as people who are kind of on a journey with us, and they don't have to come with us. You know, and I think we need to, you know, manifest that. Now, one of the things, I mean, I don't want to claim credit for it, because this is, you know, this was the product of much more intelligent people within this directorate thinking about it than me. But we have something within this organisation, within the Marketing and Fundraising Directorate at the British Red Cross, which I am particularly pleased and proud of, which is the Voice of the Supporter initiative. And what it is in concept is basically it's an approach which basically means that our supporters we're always actively trying to find ways in which they feel part of the organisation, that they have a voice, that they're being listened to, that we are engaging with them in ways which are meaningful. And I am so glad that we have resourced that we've continued with that we've, you know, received the benefits from, pursuing and staying with that. And you know, the benefits include, again, I wish I'd have brought it down. Some of the quotes that we get from supporters, you know, saying, "I'm so glad that you've listened to me. I feel so appreciated. I feel part of the British Red Cross, you know, family." They start talking. You know, some of our supporters, you know, tell some incredibly kind of moving stories about how, you know, potentially their grandparents or their parents, you know, caught up in the Second World War, or, you know, came to this country as refugees, and the British Red Cross has given voice to their, you know, their desire to kind of, you know, to acknowledge that, but done so in a way that's really, really meaningful for them.
And how is that manifesting? Could you give us an example of how, you know, within your fundraising function, you're giving the donors the chance to have their voices to be heard?
So, on a kind of practical way now, we have a pop-up on our website, which basically takes you to an online survey on the premise that you've given, and it actually starts with the question that Giles asked. You know, why did you give? What is it, and how did you find your experience? We got great response from that. I think the last time I checked, I think in Q1 we had 2,500, nearly 3,000 responses, and all of those responses individually give us insights into how supporters feel about us as an organisation, how they feel about their particular experience, whether it was participating in an event or responding to, you know, a cash ask, or, you know, or what have you. And as a direct result of that feedback, the respective teams are able to tailor and adjust either language, frequency of proposition, how we're engaging with them. And so, you know, the support experience team here, it's their job to gather that type of intel and then to embed it or disseminate it to the rest of the directorate, to make sure then that everything that we're doing is supporter informed. One of the other things that we are seeking to kind of move to, not going to kind of claim that we've got it quite up and running yet, would be supporter panels as well, so that we're in a situation in which when we're thinking about new mailings and thinking about how we kind of talk about our work, making sure that we actually are speaking to the people that we want to be receiving it, to making sure that it's going to resonate. So those are two practical examples, I would say.
And if we look at that in context, so obviously if we look at your numbers from your annual reports, you've just published your most recent annual report, which was what, 23?
Yeah.
But you had two absolutely outstanding years
of
growth.
Yeah.
Obviously, number one, Ukraine.
Yeah.
Your income almost like shot off the scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then obviously you probably had in 23 as well, you still had some hangover from Ukraine, but
things like Turkey, Syria,
absolutely. And those elements.
Yeah.
So those people are coming to you.
Yes.
You know, they see you as, you know, an absolutely, as you said, trustworthy channel. I want to get that money to those people.
Yes.
How are you engaging them in that next stage of the journey? How are you keeping them on board? How are you getting them
Mark,
to give again?
Mark, there is so much in that question.
Well, it's the absolute tough one that everyone talks about.
100%. I mean, I think the first thing I want to pick up on to do this sequentially is that we have actually a supporter motivate, what we call it, and again the supporter experience team are kind of the custodians of this, but we have a supporter motivation framework which basically tracks the main reasons why people support us. So when I talk about those 2,500-3,000 respondents, we're able to kind of attribute them to a number of different kind of we're able to cluster them, and trust. Just I wanted to pick up on that point, is one of the key motivators behind that. We are one of the most trusted, before I even move into kind of conversations about motivations, motivations subsequently. But it's really interesting for me, and indeed large swathes of this organisation, because even though we are one of the most trusted organisations and one of the most recognised in terms of the emblem and what have you, I would also go as far as to say that we're also one of the most misunderstood, because actually not many people know the breadth and the entirety of what we do. We have understood that over 90%, 96%, something ridiculous, of people come on board because they want to see us operating overseas and internationally and what have you. It's only a proportion of the work that we do, Mark. As a direct answer to your question as well, thank you for doing your research and checking your figures as well. 22 and 2023 were our highest ever fundraising years, driven by the reasons that you've talked about. Again, we're incredibly grateful that people chose to come to the British Red Cross to be the recipients of their generosity. But what we want to do is find ways in which we actually use emergencies as a gateway into the organisation, basically, because we do so much more than respond to to crisis overseas. Over 60%, somewhere in that region, of our overall what we call general fund spend is in the UK, as opposed to places that have experienced the likes of floods such as in Nigeria, Afghanistan. So we have a major educative responsibility, but we've also got, on a more practical basis, the responsibility and the task of converting some of those people all of the people who come via an emergency route into supporting the breadth of what we do. And it's not easy, Mark. It's absolutely not easy. I absolutely don't mind disclosing to you, I was going to say safe space, but this is a podcast, right? So it's going to be going out to people. We set ourselves some kind of targets for converting, say, the number of people who came in via Ukraine to go on to become a regular giver. And we set ourselves a target of between 15 and 17%. I'm really pleased that we arrived at roughly 17%. And the way that we do that is by constantly and consistently then talking about the other things that we do. And saying to people, look, you gave because you recognised that a particular part of the world, at a particular moment, there were people and communities in crisis. But actually, we as an organisation, so you gave because you have a humanitarian impulse. And let's work together to come support people and communities in crisis, not just overseas, maybe closer to home, or in other parts of the world as well. But it's not easy, and it remains a constant challenge for us.
And the other point I've got is, the other question that I'd ask as well is, like, most organisations own their logo.
Yes.
Whereas with the Red Cross, it's very different, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't just give badges
no.
and say, you can have a Red Cross badge willy-nilly, because it's owned by the Ministry of Defence. Ministry of Defence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
But one of the things that you developed, and I don't know if you still use it, was the Humanity Rose as a symbol. Does that still exist?
It still exists, but we don't use it, basically. Yeah. But can I... Sorry, please, carry on.
No, I was going to ask, one of the things that we will do, like one of the things that we've developed recently for UNHCR is the refugee ribbon.
Yeah.
So it's a little blue ribbon. You're on the side of refugees. Absolutely flew.
I'm sure.
As a fundraising.
Sounds like a brilliant idea.
Project. Yeah, we produced, a number of hundreds of thousands. They all went in a couple of weeks. And that, for me, is a great device to get people to think, I'm part of that organisation.
Yeah.
How do you do that? When you don't own your logo.
Yeah, well, for those, again, a great spot. You've clearly done your research in terms of who we are as an organisation, and that's correct. We don't own the Red Cross as an emblem, basically. But what's comforting, I guess, to an extent, is that we work very, very closely with the MOD. We have a set of rules that kind of describes how we can apply the logo and in what context. And ironically, I sit on a committee which meets regularly with the MOD, and we run past them propositions for use of the use of the logo and what have you. And of course, in many ways, the logo is our biggest asset. The emblem, I should say, is our biggest asset. It's no doubt apocryphal, but we are led to believe that alongside the McDonald's Golden Arches and the Mercedes three-pointed star, that it's the most recognisable.
I believe you. Yeah.
Even if it's not true, it's probably not a million miles away. Away from the truth, basically.
I want a quick distraction. Has anyone within the Red Cross come up and said, the Red Cross logo, the brand, it's got a bit tired now. It's been around for so long. We need to do rebranding. Get rid of the Red Cross. Get rid of the name Red Cross. Has anyone suggested that?
So, Giles, I can say that this is the one organisation that nobody has ever said that to me.
Good.
Because, as I said, it's the most. It is unequivocally, to your point, Mark. It's our greatest asset. So, I think I'm trying to answer your question directly. We are in a position in which we can be quite thoughtful in terms of the use of the emblem, but we are challenged absolutely in terms.
You can't give people stickers, for example.
Exactly, because we have a real fear. We talk about emblem abuse, emblem misuse. So my only ultimate response is to say that we have to be incredibly thoughtful and incredibly careful.
But it's an aside on your point. I used to work at the YMCA, which again is a very old, massive international brand.
Yes, absolutely.
And I still, when I was head of fundraising, this was a number of years ago, people would say, we don't work with just young, we don't work with just men, don't work with just Christians. We should change. And some people would suggest, it's the People's Association, and they would say that with all seriousness.
Yes.
And obviously, we would bat that away.
I'm sure.
But I think there's a point, and I think the strength of the Red Cross sums it up. That we're almost like we take care of these brands for the I think we've discussed this before for the next generation, and we only change them really if there is a reason to, and I rarely see a reason for that.
I hear that.
In the sector.
I hear that.
And I think one of the strengths of the organisation, and we always see it in our research globally.
Yes,
that's the thing, that which are the organisations that you turn to at times of international crisis?
100%.
Red Cross.
100%.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. But Mark, I'm going to highlight though, and reveal, I guess, in a way, a major strategic kind of challenge that comes with that, which is it's not the only thing that we, emergencies. What we are known for is not the only thing that we do, and so what we're consistently asking ourselves is, and I don't know what the right, I have an instinct, but I'm not sure what the right or wrong answer is on this. Is, do we focus and major on what we're already famous for? Because path of least resistance, do we do that whole gateway thing? So I'm now talking about things like our brand activation, our supporter acquisition activities. Do we lead with? And you would have probably, when you walked in, you would have seen messaging that together with the world's emergency response. Emergency response isn't just what we do, and there are so many other aspects of what we do. Whether it's our health work, our work with with refugees. Not many people know that we're the largest provider of refugee services in the UK. Do I devote resources, headspace, and other capability and capacity to saying to people, no, we don't just do emergencies. We do all that other amazing amazing stuff, or do, as I say, do we double down on what we're famous for, knowing full well that people get it, and so straight away you've got half the job done, and I absolutely don't mind acknowledging, even in the basis of this, this moment, that it is a source of organisational tensions. Probably too strong a word, but genuine debate. Genuine debate. Because sorry, I could talk for hours on this, but I won't.
Okay. Then can I take us back to something you said a while back, and I've been reflecting on it, and you said that fundraising has become more transactional. So I think you said
that.
I did.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not walking back from that.
Okay. So let's have a think. Back in October 2015, fundraising had become far too transactional.
Yes.
So the Olive Cook crisis.
Yes.
I hope everyone watching this really knows about it. But don't look it up.
Yes.
The Olive Cook crisis just decimated fundraising.
It did.
And we all took action. Ken Burnett and I founded the Commission on Donor Experience.
You did.
We published our report in 2017.
You did.
The support experience entered the fundraisers lexicon.
It did.
By 2019.
Yes.
Leslie Pinder was in here.
She was doing her thing. She was, absolutely.
Support experience.
100%.
And now you talk about there being a support experience team.
Yes, correct.
So you would have thought that in that 10 years, the sector would have learned to be less transactional and more about relationships.
Yes.
So why, in God's name, has fundraising becoming more transactional rather than less transactional? I don't get it.
Okay, there's a, so you could turn around and say, well, Paul, I disagree.
No, I don't disagree.
I'm offering an opinion that would say that, we must always fight that urge to be transactional. I think that's going to be, and I think that's our challenge as a sector. If I could put it another way, could I envisage a situation in which, notwithstanding all the amazing work that you did, the learning that you've just described, and obviously, the likes of, many people that are probably watching this podcast were at the heart and the thick of the, managing the fallout from the Olive Cook. But could you turn around and say, with hand on your heart, that in 5-10 years' time, that we couldn't see another, type? I couldn't say that.
No.
So that's so that for me demonstrates that the pendulum maybe still has further to go. It's just a watch out. It's an absolute watch out. In answer to why, I would say that ultimately, I don't know what your views on this, Mark, are that we fundamentally, even though I started off with my kind of soliloquy about, it's about people giving to people and it's a human-driven, all that stuff, I can't stand in front of my trustees and say that, really. This is a numbers game, right? It's ultimately going to be a conversation that is going to end up with, questions around ROI and you spent X, Paul, why are you not getting Y, as an output, and why are you not getting it in Z number of years? And so, that's what we sign up for, but that's the kind of prevailing and underpinning pressure that I think forces or encourages or drives behaviour.
But I think if we look at that, if we go back to 2015, that was the nadir for fundraising.
Yes, I'd accept that.
We have got better.
Yes.
We got better in 16, 17, right up until the numbers for 23. There has been an increase in income. I think there was a change that happened.
Yeah.
And obviously, I look at numbers.
Yeah.
I'm glad you've identified my ability to
yeah.
And the distinction is between those organisations that have done well and those that have done poorly.
Yes.
So if you can compare income from organisations from, you look at what they were doing in 2015 versus 21, 22 or something. 22 was a bit difficult because Ukraine made such a big difference.
It's skewed.
Absolutely. Some of their numbers have halved. Big brands.
Yeah.
Whereas others, they've grown.
Yeah.
Like UNHCR as an organisation didn't exist as a fundraising organisation in 2015.
Yeah.
Now, it's growing millions on millions every single year. So there is a distinction. What gets me is why trustees are not looking at those numbers and saying, there's another organisation quite similar to us doing incredibly well.
Yeah.
We can't then blame the recession, the cost of living crisis, or the invasion of Ukraine for what's happening to our specific charity. And that doesn't seem to be recognised. You know, it's all, well, things are tough, so there's no reason for us to worry. But, you know, as you've proved, you know, you've got a load of people coming in from Ukraine. You convert 17% of them to regular giving. Amazing. Absolutely amazing numbers. It can be done.
No, I hear you, and I agree with you, but it's not easy, you know, and sometimes, I mean, Mark, I don't in any way wish to kind of, you know, contradict anything that you would say, but I have to imagine that, you know, as an appeals director, as a fundraising lead, sometimes it is quite frustrating when your trustees say, oh, you know, the charity X down the road has done that, why can't you? Because I would say that individual organisations, circumstances, you know, do vary. What I would also say is it is the more enlightened trustees and board which take a slightly medium and longer term view towards fundraising. That's what I would say basically, and also it's the more enlightened and progressive trustees that have a potentially greater risk appetite and a greater understanding that sometimes things won't always work, basically. So I've talked about, you know, things that I'm, you know, particularly pleased that have happened on my watch, not necessarily directed or driven. I'm thrilled that you mentioned Leslie Pinder. You know, no, she's, you know, an amazing individual who brought so much energy to all our work in the supporter experience space. But one of the things that we're wrestling with as a directorate and as an organisation is our approach towards innovation, basically. You know, we are alive to the fact that actually, you know, our paradigm, our current model is stable, but doesn't necessarily give us a trajectory for growth that we know that we need, that we require. And that's where innovation really comes to the fore. So how we innovate in a way that kind of, you know, gives you that right kind of equation between risk and reward and failure. It's not easy. It's not straightforward.
Have you had any big wins on your innovation front over the last 5 years?
Yeah, no, unequivocally. Yeah. But in many ways, I'd also prefer to say to you, you know, I'd equally be comfortable having a conversation with you. Have you had any big losses? You know,
yeah, of course.
No, but seriously, Mark, because you know, because that would demonstrate what our risk appetite, you know, was. I mean, but a kind of standout one for me would be a product that, you know, and this is where flipping COVID, you know, reared its ugly head, but. Just before COVID, we launched a product called Miles for Refugees. It's all in the title, basically. So it was a sponsored walk for refugees because, as I've described, you know, British Red Cross is the largest charitable provider of refugee services in the UK, with strong links to our overseas work as well. So the reason that was really pleasing was that, I'm trying to remember, I need to get my dates right, 2017 conceived of, 2018 kind of, you know, small tests, and then, you know, us really moving to scale, and then the kind of trajectory of that went somewhere in the region of, you know, a mil, year 2, and then topping out at 2.5 mil. So, you know, a really, you know, absolutely rapid, you know, escalation. I mean, and obviously you can move into kind of conversations about product life cycle and what have you, but what happened to Miles for Refugees were two things to my mind anyway. So number one was COVID, which basically really ripped the heart out of pretty much most charities' events program. But the other, which was really, you know, if you thought about it, it was actually kind of tear-inducing, was, you know, changing sentiment around refugees, a changing kind of public debate about that. And, you know, this is not me being in any way anecdotal, but as you would expect in a kind of, you know, any kind of modern product delivery with strong social media activation and you know, with plenty of ability or space for people to kind of comment. And we had to create situations in which the social media team, we were having to provide, you know, counselling because of the, you know, reading the unrelenting negativity and hate. Not by everybody, but it was toxic. It absolutely was toxic. So to me, that definitely created an accelerated product life cycle. We were never able to recreate, Miles for Refugees at the scale pre-COVID, and so we've had to kind of evolve that now. But that was a win, an undeniable win, because it was predicated on everything, all the principles about innovation. From my perspective, which is great audience testing, audience insight, an understanding about the ability to scale and then roll out, and then, as I said, rapid growth. But we were unable to sustain that, and what we've not been able to do, I think, is notwithstanding what I was saying about numbers games and transactional things, I want us to be in a situation in which we're trying to launch a consistent number of new products, knowing full well that the vast majority of them will fail, and we've not necessarily been able to to get ourselves to that place.
Can I just do a quick intervention?
Yes, please. Well, you're asking Mark.
No, then I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Hold your thought.
I was going to be mentioning something to do with you as well, Giles, in a way, so hopefully we're going to be talking about the same thing.
The RNLI got attacked
Yes.
by the likes of Nigel Farage.
They did.
And if there's a Nigel Farage supporter out there, you're not welcome here. So Nigel Farage said, "Oh, the RNLI is a boat service, an ambulance service, that's like for refugees." RNLI's income shot through the roof.
Yes.
So did you get any kind of rebound effect from people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great and fair and absolutely legitimate question. So, hats off to RNLI for holding their nerve during that, really, really difficult and kind of polarising moment for them. And, I think that was, George would have been at the helm and remains at the helm at that particular point in time. So, however she navigated her kind of leadership through that, absolute kudos. And they did such an effective job, actually, that part of our kind of market research demonstrated that they were going to the RNLI and donated to the RNLI as opposed to be supporting the British Red Cross. But more broadly, it's everything that I've described. So it was incredibly polarising. So the people that did come on board or stayed with us in many ways became more generous because it's an expression of their values. And that was incredible. And we get that a lot. When people are giving, goes back to your question again about motivation or the conversation that we've had, we know that we, as an organisation, are the recipients of people who are driven from a real place of their values and their commitment to humanitarianism. So that was great. That was absolutely great.
So thank you. I interrupted you, Mark. You're in the middle of a conversation.
Well, no. I was going to talk about really the definition of innovation, because it's one of the things that Giles and I discussed.
Yeah.
Because what you've discussed is your Miles for Refugees. In what was it, 1965, 1969. You did your walk.
Walk 69, yep.
Yeah, walk for.
1966 was World Refugee Year.
Yeah, but 1969 was the walk.
Indeed, it was.
And that's.
That's proper research, Mark. Come on now. You're on fire.
But the walk.
Yes.
That Giles created was, and how old were you at the time, Giles?
18.
18, and he created a walk that brought hundreds of thousands of young people together, all walking to Wembley, where he put on the equivalent of Live Aid. In 1969, featuring bands, there was Yes, who else was there?
Status Quo.
Mott the Hoople or something like that. But Giles did that, and what you've done with your Miles for Refugees, and this is the point that I have about innovation, can we just look in the past and say, well, that was a good idea, let's do that?
Yes.
Or do we have to try and reinvent wheels when there is so much stuff out there?
I agree.
That already exists, and that's the point for me, that in your innovation operation, have you been able to come up with anything that's never been done before?
So, two answers to that question. So the way that we kind of characterise innovation within BRC, and I think it's fairly consistent anyway across the pieces, the team are charged with coming up with kind of small scale, almost continuous improvement, incremental improvements on on current products or audience kind of engagement methodology and what have you. Then you're looking for something that feels a little bit more meaningful, that's going to provide an in-year response or something that's going to generate a return over the next 1 or 2 years. And then the third is we frame it horizon 3 basically. So that's your game-changing innovation.
Gotcha.
So and the team, you could ask yourself questions about whether they're applying themselves equally across those 3. Across all 3, what I would say is that which is the second answer to your question, is that a game-changing innovation can be game-changing even though it's existed before.
Of course.
But it's just game-changing because people, for instance, have kind of moved away from walks or what have you. If it's paradigm shifting of the time, I couldn't care less whether it was done in 1900 or whether it hasn't been thought of. What we're looking for is something that is breaking the paradigm and that is scalable and that is does genuinely represent new practice. Having said that, we feel like we're on the cusp potentially of generating a completely new product that that has not yet been seen, and we're in the early stages of trialing that. So we'll see where we get to with that.
I'd push you to try and get some more information, but I'm sure you won't share.
I think I'm kind of commercially not privileged to share that.
Okay, but you're going to hear it here first. One of the things we talked to Sir Peter Wallace about was the relationship between the CEO and the fundraising director.
Yeah.
And I think you saw...
I thought that was a fascinating segment. Yeah.
I thought it was too.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you the same kind of questions. One is, how is your relationship with your CEO?
Yeah.
Secondly, what advice would you give to other people in your position, other fundraising directors, about how to get the most out of the CEO?
Yeah.
And thirdly, how much time does your CEO spend supporting fundraising, meeting donors, attending receptions, etc.?
Yeah.
Those are the 3 things I like to.
So let me do it in reverse order then, if that's okay. So I feel really, really blessed, genuinely, and it's not just me, it's my directorate that feels blessed because I've got an incredibly activist CEO in the fundraising context. So, she has self-declared that for her, fundraising is almost certainly uppermost in her kind of priorities because she's totally fixated on the financial sustainability of the organisation. So absolutely don't mind acknowledging and admitting that I was listening to the podcast, which was brilliant, with Sir Peter and Beatrice, our CEO, who's still relatively new to the organisation, easily is in that 40% rate.
Oh.
Easily. And
So what do you mean by the 40%?
that she gives 40% of her time to income generation, to
But
fundraising.
that, I mean, when Sir Peter said that, I was astonished. But I'm equally astonished.
No, 100%.
That's an awful lot of time.
So I'm talking about meeting with donors, I'm talking about attending events, I'm talking about hands-on fundraising, commenting on briefs. She and I spent the afternoon literally doing door-to-door and face-to-face fundraising. I think that she's quite rare as a CEO to have to give so much time, and it's for 2 reasons. For Bitch, I wouldn't really want to speak for her, but I believe that what motivates her is she genuinely is an enthusiastic fundraiser. She likes asking. She's completely comfortable as well as skilled about it, but also because she knows that that's an unlock for the organisation. The organisation needs to be financially sustainable. We are overwhelmed with the need and the increasing need, and the only way that we can respond to that, apart from potentially becoming an even more leaner organisation, is to generate more funds. So there is a real rationale to why she spends that 40%. Unequivocally, I declare that without fear of contradiction. And what I would also add is that what's brilliant about this, and it didn't necessarily come across in the Peter, in Sir Peter Wallace section, is how motivating that then is for fundraisers.
Yeah.
And how because they, Giles, back in the day, I've been part of fundraising part of organisations. I don't know what it was like for you, Mark, at YMCA, where fundraising was almost a kind of dirty little secret, or you were an aside. You weren't something that the rest of the organisation necessarily took seriously. So I would say that the fundraisers here are incredibly appreciative of the fact that they know that the CEO and indeed the board, but specifically if we're talking about the CEO, take things seriously. In terms of the second question, we're now doing it in reverse.
I do think that's a really important point.
100%.
By the way.
No, I mean 100%. But then that kind of brings me, to my second point. Because she is so involved in fundraising and knowledgeable about fundraising, it then elevates the quality of the conversation that you can have with her about fundraising. And I'm going to say, again, Giles, in every aspect of my life, I wish I could say things that are profound, but it's relatively straightforward. Honesty, transparency, upfront. We do our best, myself and my director at senior management team, to operate in a no surprises rule, kind of space. I think any of us hate being blindsided by all of a sudden for 11 months of the financial year or 3/4 you're on course or what have you, and then all of a sudden you reveal to your CEO or your CFO that oh no there's a gap there, and we kind of knew that all the time. So straight, honest, adult conversations are definitely, I think, what has created a robust and hopefully honest and productive relationship, basically.
Slightly sidebar one, I've just thought of it. How often do your trustees meet? Or your finance committee?
So the reason why I'm kind of hesitating is that we've kind of slightly changed the frequency, but we're 6 times a year now, basically.
Okay, so about every 2 months?
Yeah, roughly.
So 2 months before the end of the financial year, fundraising down on budget.
Yes.
Is the attitude of the trustees, get some more money in, we need to make the budget, or is it that no, you need to keep your relationships with your prospects, don't rush them, let's be under budget, the budget is a benchmark, not a straitjacket?
Yeah.
The latter.
It's so I'm fortunate. I really wish you hadn't phrased the question in the way that you have, because I'm kind of thinking, oh my god, this is what's going to happen at the end of this year, even though I will say at this point in time we're ahead of budget. I think that our trustees would be very much no, this is what we have reserves for. We can weather the storm. We will be thoughtful. We won't rush to short term, kind of decisions and say, right, Paul, it's looking bleak, so therefore, let's talk about 10-15% cuts or whatever. In fact, actually, when we were going through a bit of an organisational, reorganisation, the trustees and CEO were at pains to ensure that we preserved investment in fundraising, and I think that I know from personal experience that not every board would have taken that kind of that more thoughtful approach, because legacy marketing expenditure, as an example, always the easiest thing to cut, always but no, there is a recognition that that feels very, very short term.
I think Sir Peter mentioned it, you're mentioning it. I think there'll be a lot of appeals directors watching this who do not find the same way.
Yeah, I agree, I'm sure.
I'm working with a client at the moment where the trustees and the fundraising head are completely at loggerheads.
Yeah.
And you think that this is mad.
I agree.
If they were both thinking in the best interest of the beneficiaries,
I agree.
the trustees would be thinking, how can we help
100%.
the fundraisers?
No,
not
100%.
how can we make their life different and criticise them.
I couldn't agree with you more, Giles, and I'm not at all surprised to hear you say that. It's been at times in various settings that I've worked in, it's been the experience that that I have I've got direct experience of that as a mindset, and I feel it's the thing about it, apart from it being really kind of debilitating, dismaying, and all of that type of stuff, is it's ultimately counterproductive for the organisation. That's the thing that kind of ultimately, and if you care about the organisation, you care about the cause, it's deeply, deeply problematic thinking.
Yes, but Mark, so you deal with an awful lot of charity clients. How many of them take that long-term approach, and how many of them take the short-term, get the money in now?
It varies. It varies. You will find that some organisations will, if they've got a tough year, will be looking to cut budgets. So it will be, how can we spend less on, let's say, how can we spend less on a Christmas appeal, for example, and it might mean that you need to reduce the number of elements on a proven approach, and when you do that, you can say, look, we're probably going to raise less, but the demand is still there to spend less. And I don't fully understand that. You'll have other organisations, just like we're talking about here, where the focus will always be on long term, and how we can make sure that we're ensuring that income over again. But at the end of the day, it comes to a change in personnel. That somebody new comes in and they change the rules overnight.
So can I come in on that, Mark? I know that you wanted Giles as well, but when we have these conversations, I think if I kind of put my empathy hat on, and in fact actually not even that, my strategic hat on, is if I as a kind of appeals lead or a fundraising director say to trustees or the CEO or my peers, hold your nerve, hold your nerve, because that's ultimately what you're what you're asking them to do. I can remember actually an old CEO saying, "Yeah, Paul, but ultimately what you're offering is jam tomorrow, and and I'm not interested in jam tomorrow. I'm interested in kind of what's on my sandwich today." So one of the things that I have worked hard at with the senior management team here, I'm talking about the marketing and fundraising senior management team here, is work a great deal harder about giving people reasons to believe, giving people indicators that demonstrate that we're on the right path, non-financial indicators. So we now talk so much more in a much more informed way about the size and the shape and the health of our prospect pipeline, things like that. So to a direct scenario, that scenario that you've kind of talked about. So yes, it may well be that in 2024 the final quarter doesn't go the way that we want it to go to. But I'm already having conversations with my trustees, with my peers, with the CEO about the 2025 and indeed 2026 pipeline, and can say to you, look, I can evidence this is pledged income, and so this is where you have a much more kind of grown up kind of conversation. So it's not me as an appeals lead saying, look guys, hold your nerve, the last thing you want to be doing is X. It's me saying, this is the last thing you want to do, you want to be doing because of, and let me show you.
And I love your words.
Yeah.
Isn't that what the reserves are for?
Yes, but people don't want to be giving away their reserves, do they? It's never rainy enough for you to. It's never quite the rainy day, is it? So yeah.
I've got examples of appeals going back to the sort of like the turn of the last century, where Bernardo's were basically saying we can't afford our overdraft. They were running a deficit, and their appeals were to pay off the deficit.
Oh no!
And they were very successful appeals.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's a real demonstration of need and urgency, which are the things that we know drive the best possible response rate.
Mark, we're coming close to the end of our afternoon, but I just want to. Paul, is there anything?
Well, there's a couple of before we give Paul, carte blanche to carry on. The point that I'd say is, from your position, obviously you're doing lots of testing. You've probably got research out there. What would be your advice to other people in your position? Where do you think the market's going? What do you think people should be keeping an eye on over the next year or two? It's obviously still going to be a tricky couple of years ahead of us.
Oh, flipping out, Mark, that is a great, that's a great question. From my perspective, it's a bit of a cop-out. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but I actually, by way of copping out, I'll offset the copping out by also, doing a bit of a reveal, really. So for us, one of the things that I haven't really kind of talked about, or maybe I was talking about it by extension, but as an organisation, I feel that when I joined, we had quite an asymmetric fundraising operation. So we had, for years, actually been involved, if I don't mind saying, incredibly successfully in that transactional space. And so what that meant was we had a very highly powered, incredibly effective individual giving program, and we still benefit from that right now. It's still, our second highest income stream. But what it meant was that we had I would say a slightly underdeveloped high value giving operation, which is even a critical space where that kind of donor motivation, that quality of exporter experience really even comes to the fore. So for us as an organisation, and I'm trying to answer your question now, it's the thing that we are really, really conscious of is that high value giving, I feel, is an underexploited part of the market. I think, if my memory serves me rightly, that the Sunday Times giving list was highlighting that in 2023, I believe it was, there was a £1 billion uplift in donated income from the 100 top philanthropists. So that kind of feels to me that there's space there for us to be playing in more.
Yeah, 100%.
So I would be saying to my peers, are you comfortable that everything that you're doing in that space is sufficient? And could you be doing more? Because that's the question that we're asking, ourselves here.
That's not a cop-out.
Well, okay.
That's spot on. I agree 100%.
I'll throw in a bonus one, which is, for us, the regular giving paradigm still holds, but digital continues to be an area of really, really important and significant growth for us. I'm really, really pleased. Again, I can use this, that on my watch, it would have happened anyway, I'm sure, but in fact, definitely. But I think in 2019, we were generating £4 million online. If I tell you now, it's about 32, 33.
Yeah.
So we are, increasing our investment in our digital capability. And that's a link to the first point, which is that one of the reasons why digital is so powerful for us is that, absolutely baby boomers doing their thing, being as incredibly generous as they are by disposition. But we need to find ever more imaginative ways of working with younger people who are as value driven, not value, but but equally, or have the equivalent values, but don't have the disposable income, or don't want to be tied down to committed giving or what have you, but still want to give. So we need to kind of find ways in which we recognise and optimise that audience. So those are my three kind of guidance to myself.
That's great. So over to Giles for that last point. Anything else that you'd like to share?
No, other than to say I really enjoyed this moment, genuinely, and it's been fascinating, having this conversation, and I do want to give out a shout out to Giles, who was kind of instrumental in accelerating my fundraising career, and I know that there are lots of people who would say that of you, Giles.
You've got to cut that bit out, Mark. I'm sorry.
I'll turn the volume up on that bit. we zoom in on Paul's face.
With all the sincerity. No, but I do mean it. I do mean it. I do mean it genuinely, and it's. I think your continued enthusiasm for the sector and the profession is actually quite profound.
I'll send you the check.
I think that's pretty much it then. Should we say so? Thank you, Paul. For
some way round.
Well, thanks for giving us an hour, and and also inviting us in.
It's been perhaps a genuine pleasure.
Fabulous.
Genuine pleasure.
I'm glad to hear that.
And I can't wait to see the finished result. I think I can't wait to see the finished result.
Well, I think it would be a goodie from what we've heard so far. So, I'm Mark Phillips. Thanks very much for watching. Giles, do you want to say goodbye to our viewer?
Goodbye, viewers. Do get in touch with me or Mark if you want to. We're always ready to hear from you. And Paul, thanks again.
Absolute pleasure, Giles.
Coming here, feel very kind.
Absolute pleasure, Giles, and great to reconnect, Mark.
Thank you, and thank you for watching.